So greetings. This is the Counter-Racist Evolving Engineer Program. The acronym for the program is CREE, C-R-E-E, and that is my handle. And my trade name, actually, both CREESEVEN and CREEATE. I do wish that I didn't have this hoarse voice for my inaugural YouTube broadcast, but I'm renewed and transplanted from Blog Talk Radio, and if there are any people who are up at this hour on the East Coast, even really on YouTube at 10 p.m. on Friday. They might be like me, insomniac. And I'm going to get into the meat of what this broadcast is about and what propelled me to go through all of the trouble of the learning curve that I'm just at the very beginning of how to be a YouTuber. It's always easier to be in the bleachers, right? Always easier to be a spectator and much harder to be a participant. And I was used to the technicalities with Blog Talk Radio, but compared to YouTube, where you have to have visual content as well, there's absolutely no comparison to what you have to learn. And I had to make a decision as to whether or not I was going to try to live stream using one of the, I've now learned, open broadcast OBR platforms, or whether or not I would just try it using Google Hangouts here, or whether or not I should prepare and edit something, and having to decide what was going to be the most time intensive. That was, I had to actually get into preparing the thing to even figure out that was a decision that had to be made. So yeah, a shout out to all you Black folks out there who are doing constructive programming. Now you'll notice that you don't see my face, as you did not on Blog Talk Radio, as you do not on Facebook. I am similar to a popular YouTuber, at least popular with a lot of Black women, Chrissy, in that I am reticent to be visually identifiable. I have financial dealings in the works, and there are not a few people in not surrogate life, but like 3D real life, who would like nothing better, and certainly a lot of people out there on the internet who would like to deprive me of my means of making money. And so I'm very reluctant to do that, but I would tell you what, and this will be the intro of something very important, which is to acknowledge people in the way that they have contributed to my evolving. And so there is a Facebook associate, a very close Facebook associate of mine. In fact, he is the only co-moderator with me on my secret Facebook group, CREESEVEN Exchange on Facebook. And Kofi Lyon, as he used to be known, but he is known now as Max Bigavels. He is the one who suggested. I would have never even thought about doing it. YouTube was just not something I was ever going to do. But he is a very technically proficient. He is the founder and operator of World Afropedia, a man of many talents. He was a guest of mine on the old platform at Blog Talk Radio. And he suggested that I do this because he understands the importance of this ADOS issue as pertains to Black people anywhere, including Black people in North America, the part of North America known as the United States. He understands the importance of that to the work that we have been doing. We've been doing some very specialized work. The people in the, excuse me, I'm going to have to clear my throat, in the secret group, CREESEVEN Exchange, know that we've been doing some very specialized work. And I would say, definitely, of all the participants and all of their contributions are very valued by me. Max has been the most active in helping to refine the work that we do there. And the work that we do there, what we do, we discuss many things, but we get down to the hard work that people have not wanted to do, and that is to define this term Black person in concrete ways and ways that are measurable. And I will tell you now that it is practical, uh, and it works. In other words, I would say 90+% of the time it matches the gut feeling that people have when they look at a person. It's very simple, simple math that you can do in your head. There are little tricks to it. But I will tell you that even though I did promise one of the members of that group that that would be the topic of this broadcast, it will not be, because there are some visuals that have to be prepared, and I have them all in a folder. But setting up the need for this, the need for the tool, I found itself when I went through run-throughs was going to take quite a bit of time. So if I were to set up the need for the tool, because in that group, we've encountered all of the objections that come to even wanting to define it by appearance, wanting to exclude people, people not understanding why or how it works. So we know all of that. So I know the work that it's going to take to set it up. So that's going to take some time in itself. So that is mostly what this is going to be about, and its connection to the ADOS movement. And then in subsequent broadcasts, either the second or the third, probably the second, that is when I will show examples of how to use the CREE tool so that we can deprogram our minds. At a certain point, you kind of know. So for instance, uh, you know, a child of some age, 8 or 9, they may know the adjective tall, but at some point they become familiar with measurements, and they begin to understand that a tall person is generally somebody, if they are a male, who is 6 foot or above. And as they become familiar with the measuring tool, they no longer need it to be able to ascertain whether or not the person they're looking at is a tall person. The measuring stick itself begins to prime the mind. And so it is not this tool. After a while, after you begin to use it, you'll be able to deprogram your mind from believing that just anybody who says they are Black, or says they have some Black ancestry, is a Black person. The inclination to do that is very, very anti-Black. It is a notion that we are the refuse pile. In other words, all people who are refused by other groups, if they are of 2 or more veins of parentage. If Black happens to be in there, you throw them in the Black pile. And Black always accepts. Everyone else can exclude, but Black people can never exclude. And we've used it to say, well, it pumps up our numbers and helps us with budgeting things with United States Census and so on. But it really does a lot of damage, because what happens is those people who identify as Black but who are not actually Black, and we're talking about appearance here, phenotype. And I do have visuals, just let me lay it out. Those people do not live, even though they identify as Black, they do not live the life of a Black person. They do not have the problems that we have. They do not have the obstacles that unambiguously Black people have. Okay, so it's not helpful for those people to be propping up our numbers. It's not helpful for them to be at the forefront of leadership. Okay, the Adam Clayton Powells, the Ben Jealouses. I could now. Here's the thing. I am not a person. I forgot the whole thing about what Kofi told me. Kofi/Max. Max says, because I told him I was still undecided as to whether or not I would show my face as I was talking. And Max says, you know what, don't. What you should do is you should tell the listeners that you will turn the camera on when you get to 50K subscribers, if and when, right? It's quite a bit of hubris. But if and when that happens, then that's up to you, the listeners. So whether or not, I'm holding up pretty well now. I don't think I would mind people looking at me. But whether or not that continues to be the case, you may have to see me when, I'm speaking like, I remember back in 1992. I mean, when that happens, when I'm on camera for you, depends on, um, you know, the listeners, how fast we get to 50K subscribers. So that's the basic background. I also want to thank, and I think it's very important to thank people that have been important. Like, it's important in terms of what we're doing in terms of the work, because that's the science of it, the psychology of it. We are a social species like all primates, and we as individuals generally appreciate being acknowledged for the work that we do. Um, and when we are so acknowledged, if that becomes the norm, it greases the wheels for more contributions. So I think we should be in the habit of doing that, and not, I'm not always going to remember who I got something from, but I'm never going to knowingly not thank someone who has contributed to my mental development and to my work. Uh, I remember a man, with his initials are M. I didn't get his permission, but he's also in the secret group, and he asked some questions about what I thought about uh, what was happening on the Breaking Brown channel, um, and that helped develop a large part of how I structured the outline for this broadcast. I also want to thank Mr. H. Fox. Boy, this is taking forever to just get started, isn't it? Mr. H. Fox, who has taken a lot of my content and or some of my content and uploaded it to YouTube. Max has also uploaded quite a bit of my content to archive.com. In fact, I think 100 of the 101 programs I did over there have been uploaded to archive.com. I believe that's the web address. Yeah, and then lastly, but certainly not least, um, I just want to say thank you again to William Darity, colloquially known as Sandy Darity, who I had on my program probably back in 2011 a couple times, and have just read his work and quoted from his work. So now comes the part that is, I'm not uncomfortable, but it's unusual for me. Um, there is a there is going to be no way around this broadcast to an extent being personal, and there's and as I get into it, you're going to see what I mean. I'm going to have to name a few names, um, and obviously that's part of YouTube, is it gets personal right back, and I'm ready for that. Um, a large part of what I'm going to be talking about is how people look, and you can't even see me, right? So that'll be one of the very first things that will be a subject of criticism for me. But there's not going to be a way around getting personal. It's not going. It in no way is it mean spirited. Uh, so again, setting the background, because we're talking about how people look and how that motivates what is important to them, how that motivates how they frame ideas, how they frame the agendas. Um, I feel I should tell you some things about myself up front. So first of all, hopefully clearly you know that I am a female. I am a Black female, unambiguously. At some point, hopefully, you'll get to see that. Um, I am not a Pan-Africanist, although several decades ago, a couple decades ago, I had my government surname changed to an Egyptian one, a Kemetic one. Um, But I'm going to court now because that's what's necessary since 9/11 to change it back to reflect my lineage as a descendant of slaves, a descendant of slavery. It's a big one. Um, I'm a native Black American, and I don't know how many of my ancestors were shipped over here in the 17th century, and how many of them were here for centuries before uh, any of the Columbus arrived in the Americas, or any of the European ships arrived in North America. I don't know, but what I do know is that I am a native Black American by any of those terms, whether or not none of my ancestors were here, or whether or not all of them were, or some mix of them. I'm a native Black American. I am the separation that has occurred, certainly in broadcasts to come, I will prove conclusively to all of the skeptics that uh, a large portion and the very first Native Americans were Black people that look like the people that we're used to calling Black Americans. That's not craziness. Seeing is believing. I will show you the visuals. I will show you the maps and the images that white folks drew and painted themselves. Um, but even if even if our lineage started only, around 1610, I'm a Black American. Enough time and events and have occurred to change who we are in a tribal sort of way, not racially. But there's some differences between us and continental Africans, just as there are differences between continental Africans. Continental Africans, they can tell ethnic groups apart. And when I'm walking down the street or anywhere out and about, I can certainly tell a native Black American. 98% of the time, I can tell without them moving. It has nothing to do with their dress or anything. It could be second generation, so that they're very Americanized. I can tell a native Black American from one who is not, who is an immigrant from some part of Africa. I can tell generally the different parts of Africa that they might be from, and they're always surprised. Yeah, so all white people don't look alike, all Black people don't look alike, uh, and that is to say that I am a native Black American. That is what I am. I am not a Pan Africanist. I do um, advocate federation of African groups. I definitely do that. But to say that I'm a Pan Africanist would mean that I think that uh, there is one African way, and that we should all be unified in that one African way. Certainly, there are similarities between all Black groups and differences between us and non-Black groups. But no, I believe in federation in the same way the white folks believe in federation. So I'll just get right to it. Um, we hopefully you'll suffer through the rough transitions visually with me. That's going to be the most difficult part. It's not going to be as smooth as I would have liked it to have been, just because of the nature of the technology and my lack of acumen in it. But here we go. Oh, um, I thought that's here we go. I haven't finished introducing myself, right? So, most important things about me. So I've said I'm a native Black American. I'm a Black female. I am of around the same generation as Barack and Michelle Obama. Um, I was now here we get to it. I was once married to a white man, and he is the father of my only child, a daughter. That 14-year relationship ended over 20 years ago. My daughter is not a Black person, and I have told her so. I also have two nephews, the sons of my only sibling, my sister, who also have a white father. They are not Black persons, and I have told them so. I helped raise those young men as a quasi parent. They are like sons to me, and it was a gnashing of teeth when I told them and I explained to them that they were not Black. It was not easy, not easy to do for them or my daughter, but it was done. Um, that so I have a horse in this race. I was in a I was in a passionate, turbulent, unfortunately, marriage with a black man for 13 years that I can only now say over the last month or so is actually over and not just on paper. I am passionate about black people effectively countering racism, which is anti-blackness. I have evolved to an understanding that, unlike what Neely Fuller said in his works, racism does not equal white supremacy. Racism equals anti-blackness, and they are not the same things. Okay, now something besides the little icon there. Okay, so if you will give me a chance to transition, I told you it was going to be a little rough. We'll get to it. I'm going to talk about these presidential candidates. And I'm going to screen share here with you. It's just going to be a little rough. Here we see three persons. No, you know who they are. Former President Barack Obama and hopefuls Cory Booker and Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris was the first to announce, senator from my state, California. Kamala Harris is not a black person. And then that seems to be such a difficult thing for people to say who have any sizable following. They are more afraid to say that than that she is not ADOS, a descendant of slavery. It's far easier and, of course, far less important in solving our problems to say that someone is not ADOS than it is to say that they are not black. Everyone's backing away. Oh, no, no, no. All of this talk that she's not black, that's ridiculous. No, it's not ridiculous. She's not a black person. You clearly look at her. She's of mixed ancestry. She looks like it. Just because she's not white, just because she's not South Asian Indian, does not mean that she is a black person. A hybrid is a hybrid. A tangelo is a fruit. It is a hybrid between an orange and a grapefruit. It is neither an orange nor a grapefruit. You cannot put it in the pile of the oranges. You cannot put it in the pile of the grapefruits. It is a hybrid. There is a man on YouTube who understands this well. I don't want to get personal. I can't prove it, but my work on this far predates his, and I know he's aware of my work because he said so. But he's right about that, okay? He wasn't the first to say it, but she's not a black person. And including such people as black who don't look it is a sort of yesa massa and a devaluing of ourselves, like we're a trash can, as I explained earlier in the introduction. And then, of course, there are the hybrid non-black people who are our friends and our kin that self-identify as black, whom we want to categorize as black because first of all, because we love them, right? And that's what they want because maybe they're shunned by their other group. But to a large extent, we want to include them because we think that it pulls up it betters the race. There's a Latin phrase for that, improving the race, la raza, so that we're better looking people. It's very anti-black. It's very self-hating. Now, there are three, and I did not put her there with that white man, with her white husband for a point. It was just the picture that demonstrated her features the most clearly to me. But there are two other people. So let me flip your wig. Cory Booker is not a black person, but Barack Obama is. You said, how can that be? Barack Obama has a white mother, or had a white mother. He's of dual parentage. He's biracial. How can you say that Barack Obama is a black person, but not Cory Booker, who has two black parents? And then people want to show me the pictures of the black parents. I've seen the pictures of the black parents. Okay. You cannot use parentage as a definition of what a black person is. People in Brazil know this. In the same family, there are people who are classified as white, people who are classified as mulatto. There are people who are, in different families, there are people who are classified as mulatto. They've got 1,000 different terms for gradations, and people who are classified as black. Because how you are treated, what your life is like, even if you self-identify as black, is determined by how you look. There's definitive science on that. Okay? It is the only logical way to define who is black and who is not. And as we apply the rulers, I mean, if Barack Obama was walking down the street, and he had never been the president, I would see him as a black man. His coloring is not much different than the Khoisan people in South Africa. I'm getting into a little bit of a preview here, but I'm not going to tell you how to score it, but I will show you he has dark eyes. He has a broad nose. His lips are fuller. He has that little area between the eyes, the bridge of the nose. It's depressed more than Cory Booker's is. A concave nose bridge is something characteristic of black people. Cory Booker has very light colored eyes. He's always had a shaven head, but I looked at his hair when he was a child. I saw the fluffy afros. Having lived through the era of fluffy afros, I know what kind of hair makes them. Okay, so all in all, the gestalt impression that I get, even though his parents were self-identified black people, when I look at his parents, I don't see black people, at least on one of them. And as his genes that determine his appearance combined, he did not, his chromosomal structure that determined his appearance did not make him someone walking around that you would not say, oh, well, that's, yeah. Well, the first thing you'd notice is his green eyes, his very, very light skin, and his nose bridge, his very thin lips. He's not a black person. Now, I know a lot of people don't like Barack Obama. They feel he did nothing for black people, and I agree. I agree he did very little for black people. I won't say nothing. There's a part of the financial dealings I have going right now are in large part due to some of the policies put in place, but they were not race specific. But he did, and on a subsequent broadcast, I will show the evidence. He did what a black man in that position could do. Okay, which is going to be very similar to the comments made by a somewhat popular video made very recently by an African man. He didn't say, I think he said what country he was from, but he was saying, look, we didn't come to get you. You know, you black Americans are extraordinary people. And he gave a long list, which I will cite. And I will refer you to him. His video is on my playlist. It's the only video on my channel. But he says, we didn't come to get you because we've never been free. In other words, they've never had power. There are no black people who have ultimate power on this planet. And I'm getting almost to the end of my my presentation. just talking about that. Now, this is the problem. And I want to bring clarity to this discussion of which is more important, ADOS lineage or uh, race, being a black person, as defined by how one looks. The problem differentiating between ADOS and non-ADOS black people is a tiny and far easier problem to solve. And it is far less insidious and dangerous to us than the non-black black question that ADOS, the non-black way that ADOS could go. Here's the part that gets personal, and I wish I could avoid it, but I cannot. I've heard the person most prominent in crafting this ADOS strategy, which I have not a small amount of admiration for, quite a bit. I've used the ADOS hashtag. But the person most prominent in crafting this ADOS strategy, Yvette Carnell, I've heard her say, the black people are losing their minds around the fact that, blackness, skin, and hair do not bind us or define us as a group. Like, I think she said it was cognitive dissonance, or there was a certain amount of mental illness going around amongst people who can't wrap their minds around the fact that phenotype, appearance, does not define our group, or is the most important thing to define our group, our lives. Yeah. Now, I would say that the opposite of that shows some amount of mental instability. Certainly not, and if not instability, there are motivations for it that are ultimately anti-black, even if not intentional. I've heard Ms. Carnell say that wealthy Nigerians who mistreat other black people in or out of Nigeria, that they are white people. Now, I didn't hear her wrong, and it may take me some time to find it, but she said that. Okay, and those of you who have listened to all of her broadcasts knows that she said that. She's redefining race here to be about class. And we've come, our ancestors have come so far to know better than that's another version of the 1950s, 40s, 30s, 60s. It's anachronistic to say, we know better now that race is not about money. Okay? It's not about that. There's that phrase in Brazil that money whitens. But the only problem is that none of the black people in Brazil have money. There's a reason for that. You can do a survey around the world and look and see who's at the bottom. I'm going to show you some visuals. And they are uniformly black people, whether they're within a particular country, whether it's in the United States, whether it's in the UK, whether it's in a country in South America, whether it's in, or if you take countries as a whole and compare them, whether or not even in parts of Asia, the Papuans. Now, what are you going to do? So if you're going to say, I really hate that my voice is hoarse. If you're going to say that, and she has said also, that race was created in America in order to facilitate the creation of wealth on the backs of slavery, right? If you're going to say that that's what is the problem, are you going to come up with a different reason for all of the black people all over the planet, in Indonesia, in the Pacific Islands, in South Asia, the Andamans, all over Africa, all over Canada, Australia, and I'm not talking about the what we think of as the Aboriginals with the straight hair. They're the Torres Strait black people. Are you going to come up with a separate reason as to why they are in the condition they're in? Because if you're not saying that it's just global anti-blackness here that is the reason that Black people in the United States are in the condition we're in. No, it's because of slavery. And had it not been for slavery, there'd be no such thing as a Black person and a white person. Seriously? And I'm pretty sure she's going to say she didn't say that. She said it. She's redefining these terms. And unfortunately, yeah, that is causing people to lose their minds. If I heard a trend growing of people saying the sky is green and should be that way, that would cause me distress. Or if I heard them say that neither gardens nor markets for food are necessary because air is all we need, and I see people taking steps to remove food from gardens and supermarkets or markets of any kind, I'm going to be very agitated and alarmed. But I would not be losing my mind. I would be alarmed at others losing theirs. This is what I mean when I say ADOS is escapism. It can be. ADOS can be used as escapism. It is not for everyone. The way that I use it, the way that I'm sure many people use it, is not escapism, but it can lead that way. Now, before I go on to another visual, some of you are getting ready to click off of this video and you're already, calling someone, texting someone and saying, isn't this the lady who called into Yvette's program and said that Black men would rather be in prison than be out of prison with their children? And she's crazy. So therefore, that's an ad hominem, and therefore she's crazy. I'm not going to deny that that was me. It was me. That is not the subject of this broadcast. It is certainly something that I can support with data. Since y'all like data, I like data. Remember, I had Darity on with data. I've done programs with data. You can look up Counter-Racist Evolving Engineer, Light Supremacy, and see how long ago I've been using data. Go look at the interviews I've done with Sandy Darity, who, by the way, did a study that showed the devastating impact of colorism. A lot of colorism is not really what we call colorism is not really colorism. It is mistaking a non-Black person for a Black person. But yeah, that's me. And in a separate broadcast, I stand by that, and I will support it with data. Now, this is a part again that it's going to seem personal, but I'm ready for it. I don't dislike Yvette personally. In fact, I admire the work that she's done. I don't know her personally. I know that her phenotype is not of her choosing, but Yvette is not a Black person. I'm going to repeat that. Yvette Carnell is not a Black person. Yvette Fuller, who was my mentor for many, many years, the author of the United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept, a textbook workbook for thought, speech, and action for victims of racism, white supremacy. He is not a Black person. That was a hard one for me. In the exchange group, I had to take a day of silence. I think I wasn't even on the internet for a day because I had to come to terms with that. And I rarely use people's personal attributes or relations to address their arguments. But I do that only when it is clear to me to be a cause of their faulty reasoning. I live in a glass house too. I have a hybrid biracial daughter. And as a matter of biology, I'm a mother with all those hormones. There is no one that I love more. But she's not a Black person. And one day we can have a discussion on the general difference between Black women, white male couples, everything that surrounds that, and black male, white women couples. People want to pretend that there's no difference. There is a difference. Chrissy speaks to it quite well. Um, the proprietor of her magazine, Divine Dark Skin, so let me give her a shout out. Um, but that's not what this is about. So this is me talking. Um, Yvette has said that Native Black Americans are a mulatto race. She said we are a mulatto race. No, we are not. By definition, that's a contradiction in terms. Just like the Creoles, black is not gray. Black people cannot be mulatto. Black people cannot be mulatto. Uh, and I will say that if we were to dip Yvette in some brown skin paint and put some dark contact lenses on her, the majority of the people who follow her, and I mean that just in the internet sense, would not be following her. This is following the same tradition. And I will say the same thing about Neely Fuller, Fard Muhammad with the Nation of Islam. We have this tradition of putting in prominent positions and being enthusiastic about and taking more seriously the thoughts and words of people who look closer to those who oppress us than to ourselves. I know she's got the very tightly coiled hair, and I'll tell you what, shout out to Max again. I liked what she had to say about ADOS. And you know, Yvette, she's got something, right? She's got a kind of southern sort of charm. And I liked what she was saying. And so I looked at that hair and I rated her. And I rated her as just barely making black. And Max, who also has people he wants to make it, Max brought me back. And he said, you need to look at your scoring again. You're not being consistent. And I can prove that happened. I can give you screenshots. I had them. Yeah, she's not a black person. Neely Fuller's not a black person. I have seen him in person, not just speaking, but up close. We've shook hands and had a little conversation, maybe about 15 years ago. That's not a black person. He has black ancestry, but he is not black. Are both of them descendants of slavery? That is, do they have Yvette and Neely Fuller? Do they have ancestors who were enslaved in the United States of America? You bet. You bet. But I mean, that doesn't make them black, right? And that doesn't mean make their life chances the same as those of us who are unambiguously black. I could see Yvette as what she would call as an ally, but having listened and watched many of her broadcasts with great entertainment, and I don't mean that in a patronizing way. She's fun. She's fun to watch and listen to. I don't think that she will believe that, but it's true. People are afraid to say that if she were an unambiguously black woman, she would be dismissed. Heck, I went to say it, but I tried to deal in truth. And I think for the same reason, Yvette's serious, and I do mean serious errors, and pretty obvious ones, are not being adequately addressed by her followers. So now let's get to some visuals. Let's get into this matter of race versus tribe. The ADOS tribe, and yeah, I say that. I'm a member of the ADOS tribe. I'm a native Black American. I prefer the term Tamerican because that is what we called ourselves before Columbus arrived. And that is where the word America comes from, Tameri. A lot of Afrocentrists will debate me on that, but again, in a subsequent broadcast, I will prove that as well. Seeing is believing. All right, transition. I'm going to share a different visual with you. These rough transitions. Okay. Found the one I'm looking for. The Miami Metro. The Miami Metro study that just came out a few days ago. Trying to share it. Here's the weirdness. But here we go. So the color of wealth, right? So I'm going to just scroll down to the highlighted parts. Basically, in what the study shows and what the newspaper article showed, were that Black people, whether they be Haitian, whether they be Native Black Americans, whether they be Jamaicans, whether they be African, are all doing terribly. Now, I remember seeing a post by Ms. Carnell, Yvette, on her page where she picked out that Caribbeans had this astounding multiple of liquid assets compared to Black Americans. But when I saw the video, this study, I'm sorry, I saw that that was cherry picked because where Caribbeans were ahead in one area, they were behind in another, and vice versa. This is what I want to show. And yeah, and then we'll get to the numbers of immigrant Black people in the United States. So here we see that U.S. Blacks have a median wealth of 1,200 in the Miami metro area, and Caribbeans had 10,005. That seems huge. But what you will find further down, I'll just stop at each one. Liquid assets, again, U.S. Blacks $11 and Caribbeans 2,000. And neither, it's astounding. But what you will find, it seems astounding, but what you will find is that student loan debt is highest for Caribbean Blacks, okay, and South Americans. Student loan debt is crippling people, okay. Also, I think somewhere down here it shows that Caribbean Blacks are more likely to have mortgage debt. White Americans are more likely to own their homes outright, but that Caribbeans, they carry mortgages with a lot of debt. So that, Caribbeans, it's part of what they do. It's a little bit different. They finish school, they try to go to the most expensive one, elite ones. They have a lot of debt. So you've got to balance that against liquid assets. So they have a lot of debt. They probably have better jobs. I mean, that's the logic. They're making more money. So they're going to have a couple $1,000s in their bank account as opposed to 11. But then they've got this huge student debt that's sitting on their shoulders. Mine is still sitting on mine, and I'm a one of the I'm a boomer, a younger boomer, but I'm a boomer. That is the gist of this study, and then went on to talk about how Caribbeans, you read this, how Afro-Caribbeans, Black people from the Caribbean, came to settle in the Miami metro area. And it's really been going on for quite a while. I mean, since what, they're saying the 1880s. So there are a lot of Caribbeans who have been here for, well over 100 years. Their families have been here well over 100 years. Uh, it is true that they were enslaved on the islands and not here in North America. So it is true that the bulk of, the wealth of the United States was not built on their slavery, but on Native North American, United States, Black Americans. But, most of the slaves who were imported from Africa, not those, because many of us were enslaved on our native lands. But most of those who were brought from Africa in the 17th century, before they came to the United States, they were taken to slave breaking islands. So we have a claim there too, right? We should sue them too. That is to exclude them and to account for their shared history with us, how long they've been in the United States, is a pretty easy thing to do. That all you do, you're going to separate the economic cost of slavery from the economic cost of being a Black person per generation. So those are two separate accounting ledgers, because a Black person who came from Jamaica, the majority of immigrants, first, second, third generation immigrants in the United States come from the Caribbean, mostly from Jamaica and then Haiti. Africa is growing, but that's a small portion. And so when we talk about how, I understand it. I get it. I get the issue of these Africans who come here with ignorance. And they don't seem to you expect them to greet us with a smile and with some appreciation for what we've done, because had it not been for us, they would have never been allowed to immigrate here. They would never have had any opportunity to get any kind of jobs. And it's much better here than it is where they come from generally, unless they're wealthy. And even if they're wealthy, it's still better here because the infrastructure here is better. And we built that infrastructure, and we advocated for a removal of racist barriers to everything, including our anti-Black barriers to everything, including immigration. And they come over here and act like they don't know us. They don't know what we did. And many of them don't. And they actually believe that the reason that they are disproportionately, so let's talk about proportion. And so this is why I say it's a tiny problem. Immigrant Black people are only about 9% of the Black population in the United States. I'm going to repeat that. Immigrant Black people are they're a little less than 9% of the population, of the Black population in the United States. A little more if you're talking about second and third generations. And, when I watch television, I don't watch television. How can I say that? I don't even have a television. But I've watched a few series and so on Amazon. But my ex-husband was a big movie watcher. And so we went to a lot of movies because that's what he liked to do. And we would, at the same time, it'd be a major studio release, and then a Black person would appear on the screen. The last one being, what was the one with Denzel Washington and Viola Davis, written by August Wilson. Can't remember the name of it, but at any rate, as soon as the sun came up, we just looked at each other. We knew it immediately. Let's wait for the credits, because that is not a Native Black American. It's an African. They are way disproportionately represented in film and TV, whether it's news or what have you, because they're only 3% of our population. But I haven't done a real poll, but their numbers are way beyond 3% in media. Okay, it seems like in major studio releases, they're somewhere between 30 and 50%, which is ridiculous. Now, why? And of course, they're taking positions, managerial positions, and so on. And they're as broad nosed and as dark skinned and as kinky haired as we are, and they believe that it's because of their hard work. Um, and I'm going to stop sharing this. And they don't know that the reason that they're being favored, oh, and they take elite positions in universities over us. And they don't know that it's simply because they're naive and they're gullible. Native Black Americans have been here in the belly of the beast around white people, literally suckling their infants for 400 years. We understand. We don't understand it as well as we should be, or we wouldn't be in it. But we understand anti-blackness. Racism equals anti-blackness. Okay, how these Mexicans are becoming white, how the Cubans are white, just like the Irish became white. And the Irish, by the way, were not considered non-white for any other reason than their physical appearance, and that may be shocking to some people. But I'm going to show you that in this broadcast, hopefully. I don't know how long we've got going, how long we've been going here, an hour. Yeah, so I mean, it's annoying. It's extremely annoying that they don't understand that it's because they're gullible, and that when white people are around them in whatever industry, they don't have to work as hard. They don't have to think as hard to practice racism, because these immigrants are naive about the kind white person, right? That's the reason they don't want us. That's the reason they don't want Native Black Americans. That is the reason. It's not because of your hard work. Okay, it's not because of that. And if we look at the relative wealth that, say, this 3% of Africans have, that Yvette is they're calling them white people. Some of them have servants back in Nigeria and so on. They are the same as immigrants from almost anywhere, probably more so. Immigrants tend to be more risk-taking. They also tend to be, especially the ones that stay. Dr. Darity has done lots of study on this. They tend to be, and I'm moving through it faster than I'm showing you the proof of it, but they tend to be people who have a lot of wealth. And that means they tend to be the people that little bit of people who are the HNIC, headed nigga in charge in Africa, who don't have to worry about economic hitmen killing them. They're the descendants of that. They're those types of people. And that's been going on for generations. So they come here with a little more money. But if they don't get treated better, except to the extent that they're gullible. So even at the local supermarket, all of the security guards are Hispanic. If you got a white one, I'm sorry, if you've got a black one there, even though the area that I live in, it's got a high percentage of black people, they're African. And it's not because we don't want to work, right? It's easier to deal with black people who are gullible, and more worshipful of non-black people. And that's annoying. I get it. But it's a pretty easy thing to solve, right? So you're going to stop immigration. That I would advocate this would be our agenda. We're going to stop immigration, legal and illegal, black and non-black, so that we can get an accounting, except for hardship cases, maybe reuniting of, very hardship cases of reuniting families, because, black people's families are torn apart uniformly. And I would say, no immigration period of non-black people, only immigration of black people in hardship cases from other countries, and only in very hardship cases. And stop that so that we can get an accounting of generation by generation what the cost has been for being a black person in the United States. And I would say this is This would be the outline of the structure that should be followed in all of the European countries and the Caribbean. And then keep a separate ledger for the cost of slavery. Okay? And we solve that problem, and it's a tiny one. But see, uh, you know, blackness is a problem wherever you go. I want to repeat that. Blackness is a problem wherever you go. It's the blackness that is, it's not that it's the problem that people have with our blackness. Blackness is not a problem. It is the problem that people have with our blackness. That is our problem here in the United States, in Papua New Guinea, in Indonesia, and all over Africa. I did not mean to share that. Okay, let me go back. I don't think I'm sharing anything. Okay, so what I want to share, I'm just going to go through these visuals and just use the visuals to talk. There's a term I learned from my former mentor, Neely Fuller Jr., called racial showcasing. And that's where you put the black people who have a whole lot more than the rest of us in very prominent positions, and you always broadcast them, you always give them a lot of airplay to make it seem as though we don't have it as bad as we have, right? So here, Antonio Moore, who is Yvette's sort of colleague, you can see this came from Facebook. He has a graphic. I consider him an expert in these numbers, not necessarily in the interpretation of them. But so you see here that there you see the racial showcasing, right? So the top 1% of wealth in white people is 74 times more wealth than I think the median white household, right? Yes, the median. But with black people, it's 200 times more. In other words, just keep showing those gold chains, keep showing Oprah, keep showing, the Will and Jada Smith and their children and all of that. And it makes it seem as if it's not as bad as it is. And it's, something similar to these immigrants. You're going to show the immigrants who you're giving a lot of stuff to, who don't oppose you. And it's going to make it seem as if things aren't as bad as they are. And these immigrants go for it because they are unfortunately more gullible. Next one. I'm not going to show the study by Darity. Well, yes, I am. This argument about culture and entrepreneurship. Why does it everybody else can go into business but black people cannot? I just wanted to show you that I've got all of his stuff on file, and we discussed it when he was on my broadcast. That immigrants are kind of self-chosen to have more money. Okay, so you're going to basically expect that when they come here from Africa. They are going to be, the people that are of the type that colluded with whoever killed Patrice Lumumba in the Congo. You just expect that. What's next? Again, what I'm demonstrating to you is that race is the problem, and we cannot use ADOS as an escape hatch. I think that Yvette wants to define our group as something other than black people in America because she's not a black person. Okay? It's getting easier to say these things. I can understand that. I believe that Neely Fuller wanted to define racism as white supremacy rather than anti-blackness because he is not a black person. But let's look at life expectancy. So a lot of rough transitions here. Top 10, top 11. You get to see why racism is anti-blackness. It's not white supremacy. Look at that. Number 2. So when we're talking about life expectancy is crafted by access to a lot of things. When you're cut off from access to capital, to trade, to technological exchange, which is the most important part, um, you're going to have people dying very young, which is what determines life expectancy. So you look at the top 11, they're white and Asian. You know, Japan, Singapore, Hong Kong. I have no idea what Guernsey is. Okay. But that's one. Stop sharing that one. Let's go to the next one. I really wanted to show you the bottom. And for some reason, that is not in that folder. So I will have to go here. Okay. Life expectancy. The middle part here. Then I'll just go to the end, to the bottom, so you can see. Here we go. UK 33, Portugal 49, United States 43. You see the Virgin Islands, but the Virgin Islands is not as black as it used to be, as you think it is. Someone will have to look that up for me. Chile, Puerto Rico, Qatar. Now let's go to the bottom. Look at all of those countries. I think Haiti is somewhere in there, somewhere above that. Not much. Same with Jamaica. All black countries. We're going to come up with a different reason that they're suffering as opposed to us? Is that what we're going to do? And each one of them is the real reason. It's not that people have a problem with our blackness. It's in each location, there's a separate problem that non-black people just happen to have with black people. And it's not just that they have a problem with black people. Come on. Let's stop it. We cannot use this ADOS thing as, and I am for it, although it has some limitations. We cannot use it to escape the fact that we have to eliminate the system of anti-blackness from the globe. We're not going to be able to just if, you know, eh, should I go there? Um, it's ultimately not going to work. Okay, that is, Black people, slavery ended. But the problem between people, as it is with all primates, is difference. It's the difference in treaty. So that life expectancy went up for everyone since 1865. Infant mortality went down for everyone in the United States since 1865. But the gap between Black and white has not changed. Now, is that to say that I would rather be living in a hut somewhere being a slave? No. I am saying we're going to be disgruntled, we're going to experience all of the physical ailments that come from being an out group and not having power over our own lives, as long as we are subject to anti-blackness. So just like we are still suffering that even though we are not in chattel slavery, just like we are still suffering that even though we are not in Jim Crow, this is, if, to the degree that they're going to give us reparations, there will still be that gap. We should have learned that in 400 years. And it's not as if we won't get it, but understand that we are asking. All we are in a position to do is ask. Okay? We agitate with some urgency, and yes, there are going to be non-Black people who are going to be sympathetic, because they do have, it's not as if they have no sympathies for us. We have sympathies for the animals that are killed that we eat. That is just part of being a mammal. Dolphins have sympathies for people who lose their belongings in the ocean, and we can capitalize on that. We'll get something, and if we use that, we can use that to get to the ultimate solution, which I will discuss in another broadcast. But without the power to enforce anything, they'll just keep bombing things. They'll just keep poisoning things. It's not going to stop. We are still in the position of asking. ADOS is the 21st century version of anti-abolitionism, of civil rights. Did it get us somewhere? Yes, it did. Is it going to get us where we need to go? No. Should we do it? Yes. Why? Because we get a little something. We undo the knot a little bit more. We get a little bit more space to get done what we need to get done. I just wanted to show the Black people who are called Papuans. And they're in Asia. But just, picture's worth 1,000 words. Those people there are having just a harder time as Black people anywhere. There he is, like a trophy. Dead man looks to be, I don't know how old he is. Look at him, look at the smile. This could be just white people in Mississippi lynching a Black person from a tree. Racism equals anti-Blackness. It does not equal white supremacy. And it is the problem to be solved. Not simply reparations for slavery. Not whether that's here in the United States, whether that is in Jamaica, Haiti, Barbados. That trend will not stop the power relation of non-Black over Black and the suffering that comes from that. We cannot use ADOS as an escape hatch from Blackness, or to say we support our brothers and sisters doing the same thing. What to ask? To keep asking people who have shown, not over just centuries, but millennia, race was not created in the United States for slavery. Okay? I could go to, this is the subject of a book, so, I could go on and on. Racism has existed since at least the Romans and the Greeks when they were white. Okay? It was not created. We are creatures who identify other creatures by how they look, by how they move. People are no different. And because of that, the life conditions of hybrids that we call mulattoes, who look like mulattoes, right? Because that's the thing, it's how they look. Because there are people who have one non-black parent and you would never know it, right? They could fit in somewhere amongst a large group of black people in Africa. But if they look like a mulatto, it's not the same life, okay? Now, this is going to be the more difficult. Here, let me share something. I love William Darity. I call him William Darity, Dr. Darity. She likes to call him Sandy Darity. Maybe it connotes some familiarity. But I've been loving his work. You know, I'm not brand new to this. So this video I'm about to show you, you cannot find on the internet. I looked and looked and looked. That's why a lot of times when you find stuff, you've got to download it immediately, because if you don't, it'll be scrubbed. But I happened to have downloaded it when I saw it because I was afraid that it would be scrubbed. And I don't have wonderful audio here, so I'm going to just use the mic on my headset and let you see this.
At last year's economics convention.
Pause it, and get this screen ready. Okay. And hopefully you can hear this. So I'm taking my headphone off. That's what this is, to put the mic out. Play it, would you?
Perhaps the most interesting and depressing research we heard about was from Duke economist Sandy Darity on colorism. Bias based on the shade of one's skin.
Darker skinned black men are confronted with higher levels of discrimination and lower wages in America's labor markets than lighter skinned black men. And that in fact, and this is maybe the most provocative result, is that there's really not a statistically significant difference between labor market outcomes for lighter skinned black males and white men.
At this year's convention, however.
Yeah, that's all I wanted you to hear. There is not a statistical difference between the lightest skinned, air quote, black men and white men. So these people running around saying I'm black, self-identifying as black, are not physically black, and therefore they do not live the lives of an unambiguously black person. Therefore, they are not motivated for the most part. You may find some allies, but they are not motivated for the most part to the degree that we are, because they don't have the foot on their necks the way that we do. People who share similar objectives, or in our case, similar obstacles and problems, or the magnitude of those problems, are more likely to say and do things that are favorable to us than those who are not. This has always been, and it has always been, and should be a factor in who we support in elections, in the United States, our own particular states, our locality, who we help, who we support, okay? Because they're not us. Now we can ask, and if white people would prefer to talk to them and they will not talk to us, we got to go through them, okay. But they're not us. And they don't deserve whatever kind of reparations or repair, whether it's self-administered through amazing innovation on our part, or if it is getting just some portion of what we're justly due economically, they do not deserve what we get. Because look, their ancestors, a person looks the way that they look for a reason. That means that they had half of their ancestors, or some significant portion, were not black. And so, of course, they didn't live a black life. But not only that, the hybrids did not live a black life. So whatever harm is being done to, and we now know that traumatic events, we now know that lifelong stressors are encoded into our DNA epigenetically. It switches things on or off, having to do with many kinds of diseases and predispositions to diseases. If you have not had ancestors that lived lives as hard as unambiguously black people, your life is not the same. You weren't even born with the same handicaps that we were. Okay? It's not the same thing. It matters. It's not simple bickering. I don't know how many people have actually seen a pic of Neely Fuller. Sometimes you hate to have to do all this stuff, because a lot of this stuff people can just do on their own. Like, they can do it. It's like it's no dog and pony trick to show something that other people could look up on their own. Show you a picture of Neely Fuller. And I can attest to the fact that this is what he looks like, because I had met him person to person. We were less than 2 feet. Our faces were less than 2 feet apart. How in the world do you call that a black person? And his work is genius. It's brilliant. I stand on the shoulders of his work. I guess in the same way that Fard Muhammad would say that or Malcolm X would say that he stood on the shoulders, his thinking stood on the shoulders of Fard Muhammad, who was clearly a white man, right? But yeah, I think he's a sincere man. I think his work is genius. But he framed the problem incorrectly, because he's not black. It's not white supremacy that's the problem. It's anti-blackness. Let's take a look at a few more of these people. All the pictures are rough, because for whatever reason, it won't just show immediately. So those transitions to the pictures are rather rough. Y'all know who this is, right? No way in the world you could say her life is like an unambiguously black woman. Clearly, right? So when the women from The View said she wasn't black, you got white people telling you she's not black. Her middle school teacher told her she was white, and yet black people around her still claiming her. I'm not saying she's a bad person. I never watched, I've never seen her on any of her TV shows or anything like that. And maybe there are white people who do not consider her white. Some do, but she's definitely not black. We ought to have some standards ourselves. We are not the refusal pile. We are not the refuse pile. We are not the trash bin. She is not trash. She is a person. She is not a black person. Next pick. It's going to be a Valerie Jarrett, who was a top aide to President Obama. And Roseanne Barr got in a lot of hot water for saying bad things about her. And then she said, I thought she was white. I actually believe that she thought she was white. But even if she didn't, she certainly is not black. Okay. Top 8. These people don't live the same life as we do. And it's not just about color. It's not just colorism. It's anti-blackness. Being a black person is not just the color of your skin. Albino black people get mistreated by albinos who are not black. Okay? We'd have to have a separate scale for albinos in terms of the measuring stick. And that would be easy to do. But facial features that are identified with our phenotype, our genes that code for how our, many things. But the easiest things to look at is facial features. And so I want to show you this. And I have always thought that, and people always argued with me, and but I would say, I think that facial features and hair are more important to black men even than skin color. People say, oh no, that's not true. Well, not only is it true for black men, it's true for everybody. Color counts for sure. Am I sharing this? Not. Color counts, but just the general overall gestalt, holistic appearance of looking like a black person facially is at least as important. So the name of the study was, I'm not sure, but the article is obviously titled, as you can see it, Black is More Beautiful When People Think You're Mixed. But of course, black isn't mixed. See, that's the whole thing. We've got to stop this nonsense. You can't say this black person is beautiful because they're mixed. No, that's like saying this cat is beautiful because, or let's see, this Tangelo is more tasty. No. This orange is more tasty because it's a Tangelo. There we go. This orange is more tasty because it's a Tangelo. That makes no sense. It can't be more tasty because it's a Tangelo if it's an orange. You can't say an orange is more tasty. It's not. It's one or the other. You're either not black, in other words, you're mixed in terms of how you look, or you're black. Okay? But the part that I wanted to get to was, and I'll just find it. There we go. These results reveal that even the darkest skinned multiracial people have higher attractiveness ratings on average than the lightest skinned monoracial black people. Now, of course, again, monoracial black people is redundant. Okay? You can't be a biracial black person. A biracial person, as a person who looks mixed, is a mixed person, not a black person. So a lot of what we're calling colorism, again, is not colorism. It is simply that they are treated as not black people, because they're not. The whole earth, according to the anthropological evidence, was once peopled by various types of people who were black. Now the majority of the world is not black. I know Neely Fuller and Frances Welsing, may she rest in peace, used to always say 90% of the world is non-white. That is irrelevant. Okay? Most of the world is not black. The system that orders the affairs of people is not white supremacy. White supremacy is a derivative of anti-blackness. In Europe, the Spanish are considered white, the Irish, the Greeks, the Italians. They are a lower order of white. Okay? But we're finding now that even Asians are considered white. I'm going to prove that again with my headphone. And if you're not black, you have a different life. You have a different life chances. So let me get this ready. This man is going to prove it to you. He wrote a book on, his name is Krikorian, which means he's Armenian. He wrote a book on immigration, and this was a talk that he gave 11 years ago almost, in July of 2008. And he makes it very plain, yet people are just not catching up. And you've got people saying and following, Yvette's least on that one, that black people in America, our tribe is mulatto, that it's, about, yeah. No, mulattoes are not black people. They're not treated. I think I've demonstrated that. They don't have the same life chances. But again, even Asians, and of course Hispanics, are non-black. So functionally, like mathematically, if you're just looking at polar opposites, you've got black and white, right? So non-black, meaning a negative of black, is white. If you're not black, functionally, you're a white person. Okay, here we go. Gotta share it. Well, it's not. Otherwise, you'd just be hearing it, and you would not be seeing it. This was on C-SPAN.
Always were. The fact is that second generation Hispanic and Asian kids who, again, and these are the qualifiers, who are middle class, speak without an accent, have a job, they're white. I mean, most Hispanics, first of all, identify themselves as white when having to choose a racial identity rather than an ethnic one. And frankly, really, I mean, Asians, again, middle class, assimilated, native-born Americans without an accent who are Asian are, socially speaking, white. The real divide in our society has always been black versus non-black, not white versus non-white. And that is the challenge that we still face, have made some progress in, but not enough. And what immigration does is simply allow us to keep ignoring that. And the latest waves of immigrants are merely using that black, non-black line and putting themselves on the non-black side as an assimilation tool. And so anyway, my only point is I would.
All right. Well, I don't know what his only point was that he was getting to, but I believe I made mine. Okay. Here's another one. I'm going to hammer it in. I'm usually not good at being repetitive, saying the same thing over and over again, but I see that it works. And I've got, and that is something I'm learning from Yvette. She will repeat phrases in succession. And that, I've learned from psychology as well. If you say something, the more you hear something, the more true it sounds. And most of what she says is true. I just think that she's making some very serious errors, and the very good work that she's doing could end up being really, really tragic for us. And I'm going to, I will show that. That's really the purpose of this. That's where I'm headed. And I will definitely show you visuals for that. But here's another one. Yeah, I'm not holding hands. See, and the thing is, if ADOS was really about stopping the hand holding of these POC, people of color, I'd be all in. I'd have no reservations. I don't think. Because the evidence is that needed to have stopped a long time ago. I broke ranks with people who say they practice counter-racism science many years ago on that issue. And that is pretty much a mainstream idea, but it wasn't then. I was one of the first, if not the first, to just mark in the sand for that. Yeah, you can look quite in what we think of as Native American, as a Hispanic, and still be a white person. I'm not sure how long this goes. I don't know if I want to let it go as long as it's going to, but let's give it a try. I'll start it with just the audio.
It's one of the biggest, sometimes scariest moments in a young couple's life, when they meet the parents. But here in rural Brigham City, how much tolerance will there be for a different kind of couple? In 2012, what says family here at J&D's Family Restaurant?
If you're white, you're white. If you're colored, you go with colored people. Colored people.
In this small town, population less than 20,000, there are some big opinions about interracial relationships.
Every time I see it, I want to scream.
And the target of those barbs? This couple. It's breakfast time, and as folks come together, this family is about to get an addition. Her new boyfriend.
I'm so excited for you to meet Carlton.
I am excited too.
Hi!
But he isn't quite what Dad had in mind.
Wow. Nothing like I expected. You didn't tell me he was black. He was black.
But this man really isn't racist.
What's wrong, Dad?
And these two aren't really a couple.
Hi, I'm Olivia Osler.
They're actors hired by us.
Family. Don't.
Right? You didn't quite agree with them.
I'm sorry. If you're white, you're white. If you're colored, you go with colored people. And keep it in your family. Don't put it in somebody else's.
You feel that strongly about this?
I've got a lot of friends that are black. But I just feel like when you get married, you marry into the same as you are. Not spreading. I'm a person who loves
Wait for it.
And when their little children go to school, they get beat down.
Wait for when the host, John Quinones, asks about himself.
Oh, you're half black. You're this. And I don't like that. It's all right. If you're a Mexican person, they're still white people. But black people and white people, no. I'm sorry. It breaks my heart.
I'm Mexican, so I would be okay.
Oh, you'd be okay. I'd marry you in a minute.
And what about the woman who was brought to tears at the very thought of her daughter being in an interracial relationship?
You know, back in the old days, you know, that was
Okay.
a thing. And so
All
it's a
right.
thing now, and I think it's okay,
it's
but
enough to get out of that one. Okay. All right. So yeah, if ADOS was about not holding hands with Hispanics, we'd be great. See, by not explicitly defining ADOS, American Descendants of Slavery, in terms of race and lineage of slavery. See, if those four letters don't make any reference to race, okay, you'll end up with a lot of people, if anything significant comes from it, right? So if we get anything close to the set-asides that the Asiatic Native Americans have gotten, right, in the form of reparations, there are going to be a lot of people who look like Elizabeth Warren who are going to be cashing in on that, bet on that. So typically we don't think of Native Americans being what we think of as a black person, and that's for another program. Again, seeing is believing. And I will share the source of each image, so there will be no doubt. When that happens, see, the argument that these Mexicans have that all of this was Aztlan, that California, Arizona, and Nevada, and all of that, this was their country, or that the Native Americans, this is theirs, and they're taking it back. See, and our Black American opposition to their immigration coming here and taking what little bit of jobs there are, what little bit of benefits, should be thrown aside because this is their land. I'm going to rebuke you on two counts. Number one, you are not the most native to the Americas. I'm going to prove that. So stop that. And anyways, it's never been about who was here first. That's not the way the universe works. It's not the way Earth works, whether it's people or other creatures, tribes, prides, groups of creatures. They displace others. It's about power. Okay, so your being first means nothing. Now, the thing is, you want to come here now because what's here now is better than where you are now and what it was possibly before. And guess who made it that way? Both with skilled and unskilled labor. Many of the inventors of all the stuff that drove America's industrial, we never got credit for that. We weren't made billionaires based upon our inventions or our hard work. And now you want to come and cash in on that. You're not, first of all, you're not the most native. You're not, certainly not the only native. We are. You don't have a claim on that. But let's dispense with all that. Okay? Because really what you're coming to is not the land, you're coming to the opportunity. And Black Native Americans made that opportunity for you. Now, where I was going, however, was to show that if we don't make sure that there is a clear racial delineation for American descendants of slaves, we are going to end up in the same situation as these Asiatic, in other words, people who came many, many centuries ago from parts of Asia, mostly Central Asia, to the Americas, and are thought of as the only Native Americans now. Okay? Yeah. So let's share what they used to look like. Let me share what they used to look like, and we can get a comparison of what they look like today. I've got to really get rid of a few things. Hang on here. All right. Why is that not? Pretty dark skin, right? Pretty dark skin. Not black. Not black people. But that's what they used to look like. Right? The Asiatic Native American. Let's look again. Let's look at some more. I don't know. But they don't look like Elizabeth Warren to me. That's what they used to look like. Hmm. Okay. Oh, that's kind of dragging on. So let's just go to what they look like now. Right? I had another one for what they used to look like, but let's just go to what they look like now. Hey, that's the principal chief of the Cherokees. And those were Cherokees before, right? He looks like Elizabeth Warren to me. Yeah. Through the Dawes Act, they paid $5. And maybe he had, some great-great-grandmother several generations back. But this is a Cherokee Indian now. Looks like Elizabeth Warren. Cashing in on that casino money and all that other good stuff. And he's not an isolated incident. He is not isolated. Let's look at a group of them, a huge group of them, a representative sample of the Cherokee tribe. If I could get this to screen share to work. Wrong one. Okay. The right one. Here you go. That is the Cherokee Nation Tribal Youth Council, what, 3 years ago, 2016? Those are white people. I mean, white, right? Not in the mathematical sense. Clearly, they're non-black. Okay? And they are raking in tons of money, you know. Out here in San Diego, we have these casinos. And you know what's so interesting? They're raking in tons and tons of money, but I've only been 3 times. And every time I've been there, I have seen a member, a tribe member, Barona, I think, who, if he were just walking around in downtown San Diego, you would think it's a black person. So this is not a secret to, people don't talk about it, but yeah, but those clearly are not Asiatic or Africoid or Negroid. Those are white people. And that is, if we're not careful, if we don't display foresight down the road for our progeny, for our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren and so on, this is going to be our fate. This is what concerns me about not having a clear racial delineation of ADOS. And ADOS does not mean mulatto. No, it does not. Race is not just about an experience of slavery. No, it is not. It is a phenotype that is associated with mistreatment for centuries and millennia, and it's got to stop. A rich Nigerian is not a white person. They are a racial showcase who's gullible and usable. Okay. So let's see what we look like now, right? Let's see what we look like now. So I got a picture here of racial icon of two different generations, one more, venerated than the other. But I got Muhammad Ali and Floyd Mayweather. And Muhammad Ali was lighter skinned than that. But I mean, those are black men, right? He was lighter skinned. Muhammad Ali was lighter skinned, but he was of a skin tone that is not uncommon in people that you would never doubt were Africans. And as I said, the Khoisans in Southern Africa. Yeah, so this is what a Black American, Native American looks like now. Okay. How about we look at Muhammad Ali's grandson and see what could happen to us? How about we do that? Okay. So, share the screen. Go to the picture. yeah, that's Muhammad Ali's grandson. Just meditate on that a bit. I mean, there are so many examples of this. This isn't some fluke, but we only have so much time. It's been almost 2 hours. But you can bet that this is what will happen if we don't take steps to protect the racial integrity of ADOS. His mother, uh, Muhammad Ali, like a lot of black men, liked mixed women. So his mother was somewhat mixed. His father's white. He's white. Now, the recombination, genetic recombination through sexual reproduction, can make all kinds of combinations. He could have a brother that would look black. I've seen families like that. At another time, if somebody wants to push me on that, I can show you that. But he's not. That's a non-black person. I'd go so far as to say that's a white person. I'm not a white person, but I think I know the criteria that they use to determine who's white nowadays, especially given the comments on Meghan Markle and Valerie Jarrett. And I'm going to say, yeah, he's white. Just for emphasis, I'm going to show you Quincy Jones and his daughter Rashida Jones. And then I'm going to go to one that's going to really make people angry. I'm not going to tell you who that is. But let's look at Quincy Jones. He's also an icon in the music business. Producer extraordinaire. This is him when he was a young man. He's been lucky enough to live quite a long time. But here he is. Quincy Jones. He produced for Michael Jackson, Tevin Campbell. He did Rocket with, it's the beginning of the hip hop era. But he produced, icons like James Ingram and Patty Austin. Been around a long, long time, worked with Ray Charles. Yeah, he's very famous. Musical icon. That's Quincy Jones. Why don't we look at his daughter? Thank you for bearing with me on this sort of inaugural thing. Okay. This is Quincy Jones' daughter. That's a white woman, right? Not a black woman. Almost looks like she's trying to pass off herself as an Asiatic Native American, like Elizabeth Warren, just a little bit of more color. Like the Melungeons claimed, but what they really were was mixed race people, the Melungeons in West Virginia. Okay. This is what could happen to us. And it will happen if we don't take steps. Race is not a white person is not someone who has money and mistreats other people, other black people. That's not who a white person is. Not someone who's positioned with money. If you're a black person, your money is never stable. It can always be taken from you. This is why you don't see my face. And I'm not of means. I'm working on it. Now, here is the one that is going to just infuriate a lot of people. Okay? And until I get that picture up, I'm not going to mention. And when you see the picture, I won't probably have to say anything, but Sometimes people are trying to listen as they drive or something. I can never seem to get that thing to show up right. Okay, he should need no introduction. But anyway, that is Steph Curry and his mother. Now, Steph Curry's father, unambiguously black man. Steph Curry, not a black man. Not a black man. His mother, not a black woman. People like to say Steph Curry is a black man because this is the rule that people like to use. This is what I wanted to get into. And it doesn't work. It's illogical. Okay. And you know what? That weird screen that pops up every time I switch visuals is going to prove it. People like to have this rule. This is the old rule. And they could be so emphatic about it. You're black if you have a black parent. One black parent. Of course, you know, that's the one drop rule. That's hypodescent. But no. There's these very quote unquote pro-black people who say, no. You are black if you have two black parents. If you have two black parents, like Yvette says she does, right? Says she does, right? If you have two black parents, you're black. Okay, now that does not work because according to the refuse one trash rule, the trash one drop trash rule, Steph Curry's mother is black. Okay? And therefore, he's black. But of course, let's suppose that Steph Curry's mother had not married Mark Curry, the black man, and married a white man. And the children they had. 90% odds those children would have looked phenotypically white and therefore logically would have a white life and be white. But by the rule of back up. Let's suppose that she had married, well, if she'd married a white man, her children will look white. But if you say one parent has to be black and then the children are black, then of course those white children would be black, right? Now let's suppose she marries someone who looks like herself and their children look like that. And everybody in the family can walk around living white lives because you're going to say that both of the parents were black and therefore all the children are black, and then you get people who look like Elizabeth Warren because it just goes on and on that way. You know, all of humanity started out black. So does that mean, you know, that everybody's black? It's absurd. It's like this. Well, if they've got two black parents, they're black. But what if I look at the pictures of their parents, and I don't think they're black? How do I know they're black? And every time I ask that question, I mean, I really feel like that's the only point where I get to the point where I'm saying in my head, okay, is this a dumb person? Because if you're going to tell me that a person is black if both their parents are black, and then I'm saying, okay, show me the pictures of the parents and tell me how you know they're black. I said, well, both their parents were black. No, you're not. You're missing the point. Okay, show me the pictures of the grandparents. How do you know they're black? In other words, when you're looking at a person of whatever generation, how do you know they're black? You have to have some physical criteria. You can't go by the parentage rule. It makes no sense because when you do, you get this. This is what you get. When I stop sharing a particular screen, I shared the whole screen, and you just get this mirror that just goes on forever. And you never get the question answered. You never get the picture of what you want to get. It's called recursiveness. You get a wall of mirrors. You see how that just goes on and on and on? If you could just go into the computer, it's an infinite back to the dawn of humanity. You cannot go by the parentage rule, either one parent or two parents. You have to have physical criteria that you can lay your eyes on, and that is how people are treated, not based upon some heritage that they might be able to. No one's walking around with their heritage kit or even their DNA kit. DNA is a whole nother problem, okay? You could test as having mitochondrial DNA that is white and be a unambiguously black person. This happened to a YouTuber, and vice versa. DNA has all kinds of problems, okay? That's another broadcast, okay? But it has all kinds of problems in terms of determining your race. It can be refined at some point and be reliable, but it is not now, okay? You should be able to look at a person and know that they are black. Not this on and on and on thing about what each parent looked like. All right. Race is not a social construct. It's real, and I know there are people who are thinking in their minds right now, no, I know. Let me tell you, so many black people, the vast majority of black people, who have been to college are desperate to believe that race is a social construct for whatever reason, right? For slavery or for whatever. We want to believe it. And the reason we want to believe it is because we believe that if it is biological, that if it's not a racial, a social construct, that is equal to saying that we're inferior because look at our position, right? No, race is a real thing, okay? So let me give you an analogy. There are these little, if you live in the country, I don't, but I know about aphids, these little green sort of, butterfly looking, waspy looking bugs. And they like roses. They like a lot of plants. They'll destroy the plant. But an aphid, being able to destroy the plant, being in a position of power to destroy the plant, the crop, does not display that it is superior. This idea of one race or one creature being superior to another, it's a matter of power. And the way that nature works, the way the creatures come into being, sometimes being called evolution, it's not the way people think it does. There are so many different ways for creatures to change and different creatures to come into existence. There are so many ways for creatures to solve problems. At one point, they might be almost extinct, but they develop a technology. Bacteria do this. This is how they become antibiotic resistant, because they recognize there's a threat. They engineer a change in their behavior, in their DNA, and they survive and they become resistant, right? So we have been in this holding pattern for a few thousand years, maybe a few hundred. It has nothing to do with superior or inferior innate qualities. It has to do with we are in an inferior position of power, and that is what we have to solve. And we're not going to solve it by any of the ways that we've tried so far. And, reparations is not going to solve it either. I'm not saying we shouldn't do them, okay? I'm not saying we shouldn't go to college. I'm not saying we shouldn't vote. I'm just saying it's ultimately not going to solve the problem of the power dynamic, okay? So there's still people out there saying, no, I know for a fact that race is a social construct because the Irish, right? Nell Painter even, I think, wrote a book, and it was either named or there's a chapter, or somebody wrote a book about how the Irish became white, as if they always look the way that they do now. And it was just a cultural thing. No. The reason, see, at the beginning of the 20th century, and in the 19th century, Italians were not considered white. I was in a group once where this white guy came on and he used white to talk about people who weren't Italian, but he's a throwback. But there was a time when, yeah, Italians were not considered white. They were considered a mulatto, of Negro strain. Spaniards, Greeks, all the Southern Europeans, okay? They were not considered white. And the reason they weren't was because they looked mixed. That's why. But you say to yourself, but not the Irish. The Irish, that was a cultural thing. That proves it's a social construct. As soon as they acculturated themselves and learned how to treat people and mistreat black people, then they became white. No. The Irish were not considered white by white people for the same reason that the Italians and the Spaniards and the Greeks and the Sicilians and so on were. Because they were thought, they looked like they were not white. Now, you won't be able to read that, but I'm just showing you this. You see the Irish-Iberian. The Iberian Peninsula is where Spain and Portugal are. And that's an area of confluence and admixture from black people coming up from North Africa, when we did inhabit North Africa, and mixing with the people in Southern Europe. So that's why the Portuguese and the Spaniards are, you'll find a greater number of them with darker skin and curlier hair and darker hair and so on. So that's what an Iberian is. So this is what an Irishman was thought to be, a mixture. Okay. Now you can't read. Ooh, you can't see that. I just realized I didn't share it. Oh my goodness. Huh. Oh, because this is very important. So okay. There you go. Irish Iberian. In other words, Irish mixed person. Irish mixed with black. White person, Anglo-Teutonic. Negro. White person, black person, mixed person. The Irish were thought to be mixed. It has always been about phenotype. Nothing else. Phenotype as a marker for a lot of things. There's a lot of overlap. We're all Homo sapiens, but there are differences in the way that we perceive things, in the ways that we think, in the ways we're inclined to think, in our talents, in the ways that we mix the ways of thinking, linear thinking, more dispersed thinking, intuitive thinking. All of these things are in the DNA. If they're not in the genes, they could be in the DNA. We know this because we know that all creatures have instincts. And chromosomes only code for protein, making physical things. Where do the instincts come from? They're inherited. They're inherited through DNA. And people are no different. Okay? Now I know it's difficult to read that, and you may wonder what the source of that is. You may think this came from some white supremacist Stormfront source. It did not. Let me prove that to you by sharing where it came from. And you could see a miniature of this. Get rid of a few things. This one should share immediately in just the application window. Here we go. This is the one I want shared. Irish, Iberian, Anglo-Teutonic, and African profile. And I just want you to look at the URL there. What do you see there? usc.edu. University of Southern California produced this document. Now they go on to want to talk about Irish work conditions parallel to working with Black Native Americans or those who were imported. that's their purpose for showing this. But a lot of times you'll find the important little nuggets that are important for you understanding how something works when somebody's talking about something completely different. It's the same way that they find useful things that are useful for medicines to treat various conditions. And completely by surprise. They were really working on something else and then they found out by accident. So, this is why it's important to read some of everything, because you never know what you're going to find. Yeah. So race is not a social construct. The Irish were not considered white because they physiologically did not look white. That has always been how it's been, and it's nothing new. It was like that in ancient Rome, ancient Greece. Like I said, all creatures differentiate between one another by how we look. Because we know that, we have learned evolutionarily that how a creature looks is a signal of how it will behave and what purpose it can serve for us, or what harm it could do to us, or neutral. But we're going to pay attention, because generally speaking, a lot of things come with a phenotype, a predisposition to be able to do certain things or to want to do certain things in certain ways. Race is important. And ADOS cannot be an escape hatch from race, because that's craziness to try to avoid reality. Okay? We need it. I don't know what word to use. Now you could say, of course, there are people who say BADOS, Black American Descendants of Slaves. So again, you still have to define what a Black person is by how one looks. ADOS is like adios, like goodbye. That kind of has that little subliminal thing. BADOS obviously starts with the word bad. So I don't like either of them. I'm using them for social media purposes for right now, but what I hope will catch on is our ancient name for ourselves, which is Tamericans. We are the true Native Americans. Ta-Mary. Ta meaning land, Mary meaning beautiful, the beautiful land. Egypt was a bi-coastal empire. This is why you have the great empires in the Americas and then across the Atlantic. They had to trek, across. You will find blood types that are similar in the anthropological digs in North Africa during dynastic Egypt that are similar to West Africans, because West Africa was part of the Egyptian Empire, because the Atlantic Ocean was like a super highway for hundreds, not thousands of years before white people colonized the Americas. So our name for ourselves, and this is why it's called America, our name for ourselves was Tamerica. So we Tamericans need reparations. We'll see where that goes. Luckily, so we're at about 2 hours, and I'm near the end of my first YouTube. It's been really rough. Race is real, and I'm not the only person that's saying that. I wanted to, I guess I wanted to show the, right here it is. Let me just show this one thing, and then I'll read something, and I'll be done, and I'll wrap up. Very credible sources say what I'm saying. New York Times, not the New York Post. Excuse me. New York Times science editor, race is real. Wall Street Journal, real mainstream. Race has a biological basis, racism does not. The latter is debatable, but you could see, I'm not some lunatic out here saying that saying what is the opposite of what is you can read Google page after Google page of propaganda. Because see, this is a way of colorblind racism, just to deny that race exists, right? And I know that a lot of Black people are not using it for that way. They're using it because they want to say that that race equals racism. That is what this is what Yvette Fuller says, the author of the Counter-Racist Guide. But no, race is a real biological basis. It's not just a difference in how you look, and as I've talked about, instincts and abilities, ways of thinking. Medical professionals know this, and unfortunately, they don't account for it to the degree that they should, because that's anti-blackness. So it's known that Black people test differently for, if you do a complete blood count, if you get a hold of that paper, you'll see at the bottom, it'll say glomerular, I think it's glomerular, GFR, glomerular filtration rate, which is a measure of kidney function. There'll be one standard that is healthy for white people, or no. There's one standard that's healthy for Black people and one standard for non-Black. It actually says Black, non-Black on that. Anytime if you are a Black person, or if you're a white person and you go and get a blood count and you look at it, it's going to say that Black, non-Black. Because it's our biology is different. The way that we metabolize vitamin D is different. A1C test for blood sugar. A given glucose level will test at a higher A1C level for a Black person than for a non-Black person. Our bones, a lot of Black men who have a fetish for, I won't say fetish. Sometimes it borders on a fetish, and there aren't a lot of Black men like that. There are just a few, but there are a few Black men who have a great preference, bordering on a fetish for very tiny women, not voluptuous women, and they measure health on the size, the weight, and if you say, well, a Black woman could be the same size, take up the same volume of space as a non-Black woman, but she'll weigh, same thing with men, weigh more. And if I explain why and tell them that Black people's bones are denser, meaning they could be the same size and still be heavier because they have a higher mineral content, they're stronger, and the bones are bigger on our forearms, and our legs are longer, our femurs are longer, and I explain that our muscles are more dense and we're more densely muscled, they will say, oh, you're making the big boned argument. No, this is just a fact. Okay, we're different. The racist Lothrop Stoddard, who wrote at the beginning of the 20th century, he's the author of The Rising Tide of Color Against White World Supremacy, but he also wrote a book called Racial Realities in Europe, which understood that was about the subraces of white people, and recognizing that there were differences in the different kinds of white people, just like we have to recognize that there are differences in the different kinds of Black people. So tribe is not unimportant. It's not unimportant. It can be accounted for in a way, and it doesn't have to be done through Pan-Africanism any more than white folks have a federation. They try Pan-Europeanism, but they threw that away. But they're federated in what they do. They act as a bloc. They recognize their differences, and that's what Brexit was about. They recognize that they're diverse in many ways that are very important because they're different, even genetically. Out here in San Diego, we have some of everything, right? So in the eastern part of our county, we have a lot of Eastern Europeans, and they sure look a lot different than your typical white American or Western Europeans. They're different. So tribe is not unimportant. People who have the same kind of genetics work better together. They have different preferences. And if you're going to work together as a group that has some similarities, but not as big of a similarity, you will not have any success unless you make accommodations for those differences. Okay, and so that's what I'm advocating, that we have to take into account the differences between us as Black people, of the Papuans, of the Solomon Islanders, of the Andamans, of the Sudanese. I think this is just going too long for me. I'm getting tired. So I have more here. I did want to show, I really did want to show just clearly that tribe makes a difference. I've done the Black, non-Black thing. But I do, ADOS is important to me because I know that tribe does make a difference, and I have a visual for it. But for whatever reason, cannot find it. There was an exceptional video by an African man. He didn't say where he was from, and I don't think that I have time. I want to play it, but I'll give him credit too. He gets it. He said that Black Americans are an exceptional people. Not just exceptional among Black people, but exceptional people on this planet. What we have endured, and yet become the best at about anything we put our hands at, if we're given an opportunity. He recognizes this in the same way that white people are smart enough to recognize that, in ancient times, the Romans and the Greeks were the people to follow, or in more modern times, the British Empire, or nowadays white Americans. It doesn't mean they're inferior. It means they're different, and it means that we found some ways that work, and like bacteria do with each other, we want to share that. Okay, he understands that we are an exceptional people. He understands that we started the unshakable pride of calling ourselves Black, which you could not find really in Africa. We started that. Even Pan-Africanism, which I think is, it's not going to work, it's discredited. But even that was something Nkrumah learned when he came to the United States, Kwame Nkrumah, to Harlem, who, by the way, married a white woman from Egypt. No one has gone through what we've gone through. Now, and what he said is probably the way that I want to wrap this up. And whatever I've left out can go for the next video. He explained in the video, he said, he was talking to his fellow Africans. He's saying we need to be thankful to them. We need to help them get their reparations. They can help us. And he says, but this is what I want you to understand, Black Americans, our brothers, our cousins. I want you to understand, when you say that we didn't come for you, that we didn't come to rescue for you, you need to understand, this is him talking about Africans, that we have never been free. We have never been free to come get you. This is the state that Black people around the world find themselves in, and why we are in the position still to be asking. We call it demanding. We might call it getting our politics right. That's what Yvette calls it. But we are not in a position to make anyone do anything. We're not in a position to do exactly what we want and keep anyone from destroying it. We can ask the government to protect us if we build a new Wall Street and hope that they do. But based on history, hundreds of years of it, at least, do you really think that's going to happen? There's but one solution, and I will leave that for the next video. Thank you for listening. I know it was rough. It was my first one. I hope it gets better. I know it will get better. I'll just learn. I'll get some help from Max Bigavels. And yeah, let's replace anti-blackness with justice for us. Let's get on it. If you found this broadcast helpful, of course, please like it. Let me know what you think in the comments, and hit that little bell to subscribe, and you'll know when I'm going to come on next. For right now, signing out.